We have with us today Knox College and Excelsior High. We are one step closer with knowing if the trophy will remain in Clarendon or in Kingston. We'd like to thank our sponsors, the Tourism Enhancement Fund, Deja All-Inclusive Resorts, Jamaica Archery, the Jamaica Hotel and Tourism Association, Royalton Luxury Resorts, Dolphin Cove, Moon Palace, Resolve IT, and Scuba Caribe. Our adjudicators this afternoon, Mr. Lloyd B. Smith, CEO of Western Mirror, Mr. Donovan Wignall, President of the MSME Alliance, and Dr. Kerry Wallace, Executive Director at the Tourism Enhancement Fund. Let's have a round of applause. Our motion this afternoon, this House believes that to support the anticipated growth in tourism, there may be a demand for imported labor. Proposing the motion is Knox College and opposing the motion is Excelsior High. Let's meet our team beginning with Knox College.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle White, Prime Minister of this Honorable House.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Daniela Wright, Deputy Prime Minister of this Honorable House.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dejani Thagan, Member of Government of this Honorable House.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bernard Thomas, the opposition leader for this debate.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joshua Atkins, the second speaker and the whip speaker for Excelsior High School.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kimani Leslie, the opposition member for this debate.
The first speaker is allowed 7 minutes, the second speaker 5 minutes, the third speaker 3 minutes, followed by rebuttals. We will begin with our proposing team, Knox College.
This House believes that to support the anticipated growth in tourism, there may be a demand for imported labor. This motion says there may be a demand for imported labor. Our burden is simply to prove that a possibility may exist, and the opposition's burden is to prove that the possibility does not exist. Nevertheless, we are going to go a step further and prove that the importation of labor is not just a possibility, but also a prudent eventuality. Honorable House, Mr. Speaker, judges, opponents, teammates, and audience, I greet you. As Prime Minister, I am burdened with As Prime Minister, I will define the key terms, provide context, and introduce our stance, burdened with the responsibility of addressing the labor shortage in Jamaica's tourism industry. Our second speaker will discuss the rectification of the issues within our labor force once we import labor. Our third speaker will outline why growth demands imported labor and highlight the benefits Jamaica will enjoy, like other countries that have imported labor. Lastly, our reply speaker will summarize our arguments and further address any invalid proclamations made by the opposition. Firstly, I will define the relevant key terms. To import is to bring in workers from other countries to fill job vacancies that the local workforce does not fill. Labour.gov.hk. A demand is defined by Oxford Languages as a pressing requirement. And lastly, according to the Collins Dictionary, an anticipated growth refers to the expected or forecasted increase in size, wealth, or importance of something such as an industry. Now, let us examine the status quo. Imagine a tree with glossy, gorgeous leaves. Its trunk, branches, and leaves are our tourism industry, and its roots are our labor force. Above ground, Mr. Speaker, the tree is thriving. Jamaica's tourism industry is thriving, with 1,961,000 tourists visiting in the first 2 months of 2024 alone. The country is on track to welcome 5 million visitors and earn $5 billion by 2025. This growth is continuous and significant. However, Mr. Speaker, below the ground, the roots are regressing. The industry is struggling to replace workers who were laid off during the pandemic, and hotels, restaurants, and transportation companies are finding it hard to rehire staff due to a historically low unemployment rate and a brain drain of experienced workers seeking better opportunities abroad. If the labor force does not increase in quantity and skill on par with the industry's growth, the industry will grind to an inevitable halt. We cannot afford this, as the tourism industry generates more than a third of our GDP. How will the continued labor shortage harm the industry and by extension Jamaica's economy? Let me tell you, it will result in 1, a reduced quality of services. Skilled staff play a crucial role in ensuring positive guest experiences, and their absence will undoubtedly lead to dissatisfaction among tourists. Reduced industry capacity. The industry won't be able to operate at full capacity when understaffed. Hotels, attractions, and transportation services will need to limit their offerings or reduce operating hours, affecting our overall revenue. Number 3, negative tourism reputation. A labor shortage will harm Jamaica's reputation as a tourist destination if visitors continuously encounter subpar services due to understaffing. And lastly, damaged economy. A prolonged labor shortage will reduce revenue and thus negatively affect our economy overall. Let me further justify exactly why we need to import. In simple terms, Mr. Speaker, our labor force is suffering from a lack of skilled numbers, and this is potentially detrimental. Jamaica's tourism industry continues to grow. However, the labor force is simply not keeping pace. Currently, tourism directly employs 175,000 Jamaicans and generates indirect employment for an additional 354,000 Jamaicans. But the industry's growth is far outpacing the labor force's expansion. Our argument is that importing labor will alleviate the labor shortage and its effects by 1, addressing the skilled workforce gap. By importing skilled labor, the country fills these gaps quickly and efficiently, enhancing the quality of services provided in the sector. Number 2, providing an immediate impact.
Point of information.
Not accepted at this time. Importing labor grants an immediate solution to urgent workforce shortages, which cannot be achieved by anything that the opposition will suggest. When local talent is insufficient to meet demand, imported labor can contribute to economic growth, and as such, the sector can continue to grow, attract tourists, and thus generate revenue. I'll now take your point of information quickly.
Okay, so you stated that there's a lack of proper skilled workers within our country, right? But the thing is that there are programs such as the tourism enhancement.
And thank you for mentioning that, as I predicted. We do have programs to train the workers, and as I will further mention, we don't have an interest in the Jamaican people to engage in these training programs. They simply don't want the work or the opportunities. Continuing, the importing labor will complement existing skills. The opposition may argue that importing skilled labor will replace our local labor, but that is not what we wish to do. We must take a pragmatic approach and recognize that importing labor not accepted is necessary to support the anticipated growth in tourism. Our burden is to prove the why, but we'll go further beyond our role to highlight the how so that you can see that we're not suggesting bringing people from the dead, but something that is possible. We aim to develop our workforce sustainably. Importing achieves exactly that. We aren't trying to replace local labor. Frankly, importing labor isn't novel. We had indentured laborers once. We will import labor to work in specific areas, and once labor needs are met, we can cease importing. Additionally, the practice of importing labor begs two very valid questions. How will we pay them, and how skilled do they need to be? The opposition may argue correctly that Jamaica does not have the money to attract international workers, but countries such as Barbados, the Philippines, and Mexico have a skilled workforce that would be willing to work minimum wage in Jamaica, be it for financial gain or a better lifestyle. Honorable House, our tree needs fertilizer. Importing labor is the fertilizer that our tree needs to grow by itself in order to support the anticipated growth in tourism and fill the gap between the labor force as it is now and a trained labor force. Once our local labor force is sufficient, then the tree will no longer need fertilizer, as it will be able to grow and support itself. Opposition, we support the training of our locals. However, many Jamaicans are not in the labor force as they are not seeking to or have no interest in joining the labor force. The government has provided sufficient training and incentives such as housing provisions and increased income tax threshold to attract the workers to the labor force, but they simply do not want the opportunities. What more can the government do? More importantly, what do you, the opposition, suggest we do? With this, we pause momentarily.
Good morning, Madam Speaker, judges, audience, and members of parliament. My name is Brianna Thomas, the opposition leader for this debate, in proud disagreement with the motion that states this House believes that to support the anticipated growth in tourism, there may be a demand for imported labor. Now, Madam Speaker, the major burden to be proven by the opposition is to prove that imported labor will not be necessary, even with the projections for growth in Jamaica's tourism sector. However, in order to win this debate, the government must prove effectively two things, which are, firstly, that the Jamaican labor force is insufficient and inadequately trained, therefore to meet expected labor demand. They must further prove to us that this labor demand is most likely to be met by way of significant influx of foreign labor into Jamaica's expanding tourism sector. Before I get into my substantive, allow me to address some of the fallacious arguments posited by the Prime Minister. Let me first begin by saying, Madam Speaker, that there is nothing that the government has proved to say that the anticipated growth of the tourism sector will outpace that of the working and reserve labor force of Jamaica. Now, Madam Prime Minister, you stated that the negative effects of labor shortage on the economy. However, let me ask you the question, why is there a labor shortage to begin with? Simply because there's no true incentive in Jamaica. And the fact that these people are leaving because there's no true incentive simply means that these imported people will not come here because there is no incentive, right? So now on to my substantive. The current trends provide strong reassurance that Jamaica's labor force is sufficient to meet the tourism sector's demand. Firstly, more individuals are joining the workforce through training and transitioning into it as they age. Secondly, there's a decrease in the labor force due to factors like migration and retirement, even though retirement does not necessarily impede the labor force of Jamaica due to the increase in the retirement age and the fact that Jamaica has a youthful population. However, those remaining finding employment in other sectors. Despite these changes, there is still a net increase in labor. The Planning Institute of Jamaica, PIOJ, projects that Jamaican economy to grow around 1.5% this year and in the future, driving economic expansion. Additionally, the Statistical Institute of Jamaica estimates that over 500,000 graduates enter the labor force annually from various educational institutions. Meanwhile, an adequate amount graduate from vocational schools such as Hart. Although in their rightful position, the government may argue that migration will significantly impact this available and reserved labor force. However, there are factors that mitigate this impact and labor shortages not accepted at this time. For example, the government's compensation review, which aims to achieve parity between public and private sectors, has intensified the demand for labor in the tourism industry, which is one of the few sectors experiencing meaningful growth. We believe that higher wages in tourism will discourage migration as individuals might find opportunities not accepted at this time in this sector more attractive than dealing with migration disruptions. We anticipate that this competition will lead to weaker sectors like the BPO sector that cannot afford or offer competitive wages to collapse. Workers from these vulnerable sectors can then be retrained to meet the needs of the expanding tourism industry.
Point of information.
At this time, it is also worth noting that after the final update of the compensation review in 2022, there has been a significant decrease in net migration rates. For example, in 2023, it was 3.792, and in 2024, thus far, it is 3.781. Like I said at this time. Therefore, the compensation review has been proven to impact the migration rate. Another noticeable trend is the government's active efforts to improve workforce skills with initiatives such as offering free tuition at Heart and the LIFT program. While this will lead to a more skilled workforce in all sectors, we argue... Accepted?
I mentioned the incentives from the government, and you came and you reiterated them. Thankfully, what new thing are you expecting to happen from the same old tired incentives?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the old tired incentive, let's be realistic. Currently, there's a $400 an hour income for these tourism sectors. If we're willing to increase the wage in order to attract these importees, why not increase the wage in order to attract our own people? Continuing, that the tourism industry... out of order that will benefit the most. This is because entering this industry is relatively easier. In the tourism sector, job opportunities include roles like housekeepers, tour guides, event coordinators, entertainers, front desk agents, and bartenders. These positions do not require extensive educational qualifications, but rather a few months of training, unlike industries such as bauxite mining. Based on these findings, the
Point of
data
information.
indicates not accepted at this time a positive outlook for the tourism industry and ensures the availability of local labor to meet its demand. However, Madam Speaker, I find it quite ludicrous that the government believes that to support the anticipated
Point
growth
of
in tourism,
information.
there will be a demand for imported labor. As per the National Environment and Planning Agency, Jamaica's landscape is projected to accommodate only 20,000 new hotel rooms in the next 5 to 15 years. To meet the demand for these rooms, at least 45,000 new laborers will be required, as stated by the Minister of Tourism himself, Mr. Edmund Bartlett. With Jamaica's current unemployment rate of approximately 60,000%, 60,000 individuals
Point
in
of
2024,
information.
as I said at this time, and an expected growth in the labor force, it is evident that there will be a sufficient labor pool to fill these upcoming jobs. Therefore, the opposition reiterates that there is no need to import laborers to support the anticipated growth of tourism. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, what is the economic state in the countries that these imported laborers will come from? To address this question, we must consider the primary principle of economic migration, which is to move from a less developed nation to a more developed one. Madam Speaker, what about South and Latin America? No. The majority of South and Latin American countries predominantly speak Spanish or Portuguese, and their cultural differences from Jamaica will pose challenges in communication and integration with Jamaican society. What about the Eastern Hemisphere? No, Madam Speaker, because the geographical location allows for barriers. Find out about our Caribbean brothers and sisters. I mean, come on, they speak the same language and we have cultural similarities. However, yet again, Madam Speaker, there will not come. Jamaica's GDP is ranked second to last when compared to other Caribbean countries, just a little bit above Haiti, as recorded by a credible source, the Caribbean Development Bank in 2023. As a result, citizens from countries like Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, or Bahamas will not view Jamaica as a lucrative option for employment. With that being said, Madam Speaker, the opposition momentarily pauses.
Madam Speaker, Honorable House Adjudicators, greetings. I am Daniela Wright, second Speaker for side proposition. Thus, it is my privilege to articulate the crux of our argument, reinforcing our team's unwavering stance in support of the motion. With conviction, I shall distill our case, demonstrating the unassailable logic of our position. However, before I do so, Honorable House, permit me to address some contentions within the debate thus far. The opposition leader would have argued rather fallaciously that there are no sufficient incentives for the labor force to stay, and this will be addressed further in my speech. Madam Speaker, before I propound my substantives, permit me to elucidate the precarious state or crises within our labor force. Crisis number one, the demographic required in the sector, that is those between the ages 18 and 40 years old, are either migrating from the island or seeking alternative income sources. And yes, Madam Speaker, the opposition may argue that we need more incentives to hold such people. However, this is not a policy debate where we argue based on what should be done, but what exists. And what exists within the status quo, Madam Speaker, are training programs such as those offered by the Heart Trust NTA, which cover tuitions for students, cheaper housing, and higher payouts, so workers are not but bruised by the claws of inflation. However, the uptake for such programs are low, with a 4,000 decline in admissions for this year at the Heart Trust NTA. The second crisis, Madam Speaker, relates to structural unemployment, where there is a mismatch between the workers' skills and employers' demands. While training may be suggested, our rapidly growing tourism industry cannot be stalled, and we lack sufficient skilled personnel to adequately train local workers. Now to my substantives. Number one, fulfillment of seasonal demands. During peak tourist seasons, Jamaica experiences a surge in tourism. This, in conjunction with the rapidly growing tourism industry, will increase the demand for skilled skilled workers. Thus, by bringing in international workers, we can fill gaps in our workforce and ensure that our sector operates at optimal levels. For example, during the winter holiday season when tourist arrivals increase, bringing in temporary imported workers will ensure that resorts maintain high service standards without overburdening local staff, which would lead to diminishing marginal returns. Number two,
Point of
skills
information.
are not accepted at this time. Skills and expertise enhancement. Foreign workers bring specialized skills and expertise which are essential in providing high quality service that may be lacking in the local workforce, including communication, customer service, and technical acumen. Local workers will benefit immensely from hands-on training and upskilling due to knowledge transfers, thereby enhancing our industry's overall competitiveness.
Point of information.
For instance, foreign-trained hotel managers may introduce new operational efficiencies, elevating our hospitality game and making our hotels more competitive. Accepted.
Now, it is quite unfair to say that the Jamaican people lack certain skill sets that are quite frankly present overseas and not here. That's an unfair generalization of the labor force.
It is most definitely not unfair. As we can see within our society, if you do your research, you will see that some skills which are offered abroad are not offered here, or we simply do not have sufficient resources to implement these trainings and these skills which can be applied abroad. Moving on. An economic boost. Due to the influx of foreign workers, additional spending will be injected into the local economy from the purchase of goods and services. Consequently, businesses across various sectors benefit from increased consumer demand, leading to further job creation and economic growth. This is because as more is demanded, more jobs are created. This, coupled with the enhancement of skills within our current labor force by the knowledge transfers, will lead to a significant decrease in structural unemployment. Number four, whilst opposition may argue ludicrously otherwise, Madam Speaker, importing labor will not dilute our culture. Our culture, Madam Speaker, has faced challenges throughout history, from colonialism to globalization. We have always adapted and maintained our unique identity. Thus, importing labor will not dilute, but rather enhance our culture's diversity and richness. It may even lead to cultural fusion and innovations, something the out of many one people ethos of our country is simply no stranger to. In conclusion, the facts are clear, Madam Speaker. Within the status quo, our tourism industry teeters on the brink of a labor crisis, and importing labor may eventually be the sole panacea. Thus, I implore the opposition to eschew obfuscation and instead confront the reality of our situation, that it is likely that to support the anticipated growth of the tourism sector, Jamaica may have to demand imported labor. With this, the proposition momentarily pauses.
All protocols observed. My name is Joshua Atkins, and it is my duty as the Deputy Opposition Leader to further fortify the case of side opposition. I will be putting forth two substantives in this debate. The first being how foreign laborers would not opt to come to Jamaica as there are limited incentives for them to come. The second is how importing labor would not be in the best interest of private sector actors within the tourism sector. But before we get to that, let us address some contentions. Firstly, they would have stated that there are limited training programs in Jamaica to facilitate pumping people into the labor force. We see the TEF summer program where they are pumping high school students, college students, those who are just leaving school back into the tourism sector. These are incentives for younger people to go and work within the tourism sector. We see also where the first speaker came up here to say that the Jamaican people don't want the job. Quite frankly, the nature of these jobs within the tourism sector are that of low skill, the majority of them. And therefore, the Jamaican people don't require this extensive amounts of training to go into these this labor force, right? So we see where they would opt to go into this labor force because the training is not extensive. They don't require these extensive academic qualifications. Quite frankly, they use these jobs that require low skill as a vehicle of social mobility. Now, they stated where we can get people from Barbados. Must I remind you that the minimum wage in Barbados is $28,000 a week? That is stronger in comparison to that of Jamaica, which is $15,000 in the next couple months, right? Mr. Speaker, that is not a strong enough pull factor to pull these people from stronger economies to our country. We see where they came up and talked about the Philippines, Mexico. Quite frankly, these people would have dire trouble integrating within our Jamaican society. That is not lucrative for our tourism sector. We see now where they talked about migration, right? But we must acknowledge that migration is proportional to the amount of people being trained and put into the labor force. As people migrate, as people retire, there are more people going into the labor force. Now, on to my substantives. We are talking about incentives. Mr. Speaker, quite frankly, the incentive that is there, the 65,000, well, according to the Planning Institute of Jamaica, the monthly average is $65,000 or more, right? More or less, right? The thing is that Caribbean countries, and we're assuming that this is where most of the labor is going to come from, most Caribbean countries have higher incentives to allow their people to stay within their countries
Point of
rather
information.
than pushing them out. Before we get to that, we also see where they came up here to say that within the Jamaican context, right? There
Point of
are,
information.
Go ahead. Can I hear you?
You mentioned that the skills that the labor force needs to go into the tourism industry are minimum. They don't need a lot of work. If it is that the skills are so minimum, why aren't they going in the industry then? If it's so simple.
But that is the thing, that the incentive is the problem. Because there aren't enough pull factors for the tourism sector to pull the Jamaican people within the industry.
Point of information.
That is the reason why people are not opting to stay in it. What would well, you know, this is not a policy motion, so it isn't what should happen. But Mr. Speaker, on to the next point of cultural dilution, and I will not take any more. On to the point of cultural dilution, they stated that, you know, our culture is one that is fused and, you know, is influenced by many different cultures. That is our culture. That is our unique culture from a process of interculturation and acculturation, creolization. That is what gives our brand a unique texture and flavor that attracts people to our country. Now, we're in a situation where other people come and they make our brand ambiguous. We don't know. Quite frankly, they're coming to see Mexicans working in the tourism sector that cannot provide them with the true Jamaican reality or the true Jamaican interaction or experience, right?
Point of information.
This does not good for our brand, as our brand is one that relies heavily on our culture. Where our culture is diluted, it will become ambiguous and the viability will decrease. Mr. Speaker, I rest my case.
Honorable House, pleasant greetings. Permit me to address the key discrepancies in the opposition's case. The opposition is correct in their assessment of the few months training time required to train our labor force. We concede. But what should we do in the interim? At the rate that the tourism industry is growing, we cannot wait a few hours, much less a few months. Our tree cannot slow down. Furthermore, we will not need to pay imported laborers more, as skilled laborers are willing to come here on a contractual basis from Mexico and the Philippines on a regular salary to benefit from increased quality of life away from crime, for example, and also to benefit from career advancement. These people will be able to integrate into our sector due to us already being a melting pot and combination of different peoples. Language also won't be a barrier, as English is a globally accepted language. Now to my first substantive. Mr. Speaker, in today's global marketplace, firms demand labor to fulfill innovative and technological roles created by growth. According to Investopedia, growth often leads to shifts in consumer demand, enabling the creation of innovative products to meet this new demand. Minister Bartlett emphasizes the evolving preferences of tourists, highlighting interests such as gastronomy, shopping, experience tourism and emerging influences like environmental sustainability and eco-friendly practices. Furthermore, an example of a new gastronomic product is the K-Source Dinner in the Sky innovation, which has been endorsed by the Negril Chamber of Commerce. Such innovations will undoubtedly set us apart from top Caribbean tourist hotspots like the Bahamas, as we will have additional product offerings. Unfortunately, our local labor supply can't meet the demand for these new products due to a quality and quantity deficiency, as aforementioned by my teammates. Now to my second substantive. Mr. Speaker, importing labor is necessary to develop new products in our growing sector, increasing productivity as more skilled employees are able to work more efficiently and accurately. This, Mr. Speaker, is positive for our local labor force and society at large, as can be observed in exploring countries like Singapore, Canada, and the Maldives. Like these thriving tourism-reliant economies who rely on imported labor, Jamaica will enjoy benefits such as 1. Increase GDP through their purchases and taxes, thereby increasing the funding available for the technical and vocational training of our employees at heart and other institutions, as you mentioned earlier. And 2, introduction of innovative ideas and new perspectives essential to new product development. 3, an enhanced local labor force when our laborers effectively hone their soft skills by working alongside imported laborers. These soft skills include empathy, cultural sensitivity, adaptability, attention to detail, and salesmanship. And number 4, improve customer satisfaction, as when the demand of tourists is catered to through innovation and soft skills, Jamaica's positive reviews will ultimately increase, thus increasing demand for our products and subsequently increasing GDP through tourism revenues. Conclusively, as we train our local labor force, we may need to import laborers to not replace, but rather complement our local laborers. Temporary discomfort is the opportunity cost of long-term development. So, you choose. I yield the floor.
All formalities observed, my name is Kimani Leslie, the opposition member of this debate. Now, to this debate, I'll be adding one substantive argument to conclude the case of side opposition. However, before doing so, allow me to address the rather fallacious claims that have been made thus far throughout this debate by Knox College. So we heard them open the debate with the line of argumentation that we don't have the skilled workers, or the skilled workers are just really not here. But Mr. Speaker, that is simply not true, as you have thousands of individuals graduating from Hart, graduating from UTech, graduating from UWI, and leaving Jamaica to go elsewhere with their degree, or whatever the case may be, to work. As mentioned by my first and second speaker, the incentive is just not here to keep them here. So the argumentation coming from Knox College about the skills not being here is just not true. And then a next speaker,
point of information,
not accepted. A next speaker spoke to the likelihood of cultural infusion and how this hypothetical situation that, oh, we're going to import the labor and we should have, cultural infusion, and it is simply
point of information,
not accepted. It is simply not profitable. When tourism or tourists come to Jamaica, they don't come here to see cultural infusion. They come here to see our tourism product, which is our culture, not no cultural in what side Knox, or side government rather, is doing is painting this hypothetical situation that, oh, we're going to have the imported labor come here and the culture and everything is just, it's simply not true, right? They also spoke to about skilled workers are not willingly here to work, and it is how skilled workers are willingly not interested in the work. And as mentioned by my second speaker once again, the incentive is still, one more minute. To my substantive, Lord Jesus. Firstly, let us consider how impactful the investment in education and training can be in assuring a local labor force for Jamaica's expanding tourism sector. Mr. Speaker, imagine a world where the hotel sector is supported by their increasing profits due to growth in tourism sector. Take the initiative to offer bursaries and scholarships to aspiring individuals keen on pursuing careers in the tourism-related fields. As it is, we, the opposition, recognize that apart from institutions like High Trust NSTA, there exists a major disincentive for individuals to enter the tourism field. By providing financial support for education regarding tourism management, hotels not only attract the requisite labor they need, but also ensure a pipeline of skilled professionals who can drive the industry forward. Allow me to draw parallels from other sectors where targeted scholarship initiatives have yielded remarkable results. Just as the government identified the need for information technology specialists, they promptly distributed over 1,000 scholarships for persons to study in the IT-related fields. At UTech, another example is when faced with a shortage of math teachers, the government actually gave out scholarships to persons to study in the mathematics-related area. And this has significantly alleviated the deficit in the education system. And finally, we have the TEF, the Tourism Enhancement Fund, a summer program that can be classified as a soft recruiting tool, acquainted with alluring individuals, thousands of individuals. It helps young individuals to acquire employment, not specifically to the tourism industry, but it usually 9 times out of 10 allures them. Madam Speaker, we contend that the tourism industry can follow suit. We also contend that if the tourism industry realizes that there is a threat to labor availability, they can do something better. I thank you.
A very heated debate indeed. Clarendon versus Kingston, Knox College versus Excelsior High. We'll return right after this break.
Life is about balance, about give and take. And forests give us so much. They purify our water. They clean our air. They fight climate change by capturing carbon. They give us food, life-saving medicines, and they improve our well-being. But our forests are vulnerable. They are endangered by fires, pests, droughts, and other threats. That is why we need to look after them. We need to give, not only take. Healthy forests for healthy people.
The National Family Planning Board now presents a parenting tip from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Men are what their mothers made them.
Welcome back, and welcome back to our viewers online. Just a reminder of our motion this afternoon. This House believes that to support the anticipated growth in tourism, there may be a demand for imported labor. We're in our rebuttal section, and so we will begin with our opposing team, Excelsior High.
Esteemed adjudicators, members of the audience, my name is Joshua Atkins, and it is my duty to bring this debate on side opposition to a close. Now, I will be addressing some of the contentions that, were brought up in the debate. Now, we see where the government came and contended about skill gaps. Or well, quite frankly, let us look at their burden, proving that the labor force is inadequate. Two things. They could not prove that the labor force is untrained because we, the opposition, have already proven that there are programs put in place by the government, and we see this where they have subsidized HART to offer free training programs. These are incentives for young people to go into these sectors and be pumped out into the tourism sector. We talked about the LIFT program, we talked about the TEF. So they could not mechanize how the Jamaican people do not have the skill sets necessary. They talked about empathy and communication skills, but quite frankly, these skills are present everywhere and right throughout Jamaica. These skills are pervasive everywhere. We see the next issue of seasonal demand. Now, we must highlight the fact that they came up here to say that, well, people from the Philippines and Barbados are going to come. The issue with the Philippines is that their culture is so different from ours that the integration within our country will be too difficult for them and they will act out. They cannot, first of all, the environment, all of these different things. These are things that need to be taken into consideration. Now, the issue of Barbados. Quite frankly, I don't know anywhere of people going from a place of a stronger economy to go into somewhere where the economy is much weaker. Right? The minimum wage for Barbados, as stated before, is $28,000 a week. Right? That is an adhesive for those people to stay in their countries rather than to fill the seasonal demand. Quite frankly, that seasonal demand can be present in Barbados as well. Now, the idea of cultural exchange. They could not mechanize how the cultural exchange will enhance our tourism sector. We have proven that our brand relies heavily on the culture, right? Our culture is the main pull factor to our country. Now, where we see where different people are coming from, Mexico, as they stated, and the Philippines and Barbados, well, not Barbados so much, but the Mexico and the Philippines, right? They cannot offer the authentic Jamaican experience to those tourists that come to Jamaica for the culture. Quite frankly, we understand that a Jamaican labor force is key in fostering that experience. Now, we see a next issue where they came up and said, well, the government can do this, and quite frankly, it's not. If the government is going to provide these people with different places and houses and all of these things, that is not within the interest of any government, mind you. This issue is where governments don't subsidize private sectors for their profitability if it does not benefit the government. Quite frankly, it is the interest of the government to ensure that their citizens are the ones that get the jobs rather than others coming in and displacing our citizens. Now I must, rest.
Greetings again to this honorable house. Madam Speaker, the opposition leader would have stated that the labor force will not be outpaced by the growth in the tourism sector. However, as we argued, as by my first speaker, she stated that currently we are on track to welcome 5 million visitors, and currently we have record low unemployment, and this unemployment is vastly structural, as well as the fact that we have an aging population and the target demographic for jobs is decreasing. Hence, Madam Speaker, whilst we tackle such issues, we must take a pragmatic approach in fixing the roots of our trees. Secondly, the second opposition speaker rather ridiculously argued that the incentives will not be sufficient for the imported labor to stay. However, they are more than sufficient to incentivize our locals and international workers. Regarding our economy, we are not the worst and we are not at the bottom of the barrel. Moreover, if not for the money, people will work here for the lifestyle. Our government gave them housing, decreased income tax, increased minimum wage, free training, and in some cases a stipend to learn. The JCTI was created solely for the purpose of our tourism sector and the labor force. It seems what the opposition wants us to now do is to open the heads of our citizens and drop in that they need to go to school and they need to join the workforce. Madam Speaker, importation of labor is not another idea. This is something that already exists within our Jamaican society. We have been known to import our Cuban nurses or Cuban teachers. It is something that we have done and we can still continue to do. Moreover, He stated that we are diluting our culture. However, tourists come seeking quality service, not cultural homogeneity. Importing labor would enhance our industry's competitiveness and ensure the continued success of Jamaica's tourism industry, aligning with our goal of sustainable development. Moreover, if, as he says, we are a culture created by creolization, the mixing of various cultures, wouldn't it bring in more cultures, creating cultural innovations, something that will attract tourists even more? Furthermore, Madam Speaker, it was alluded to that unemployment will increase because we're not employing more Jamaicans to complete tasks. However, as aforementioned, we won't import at the expense of our skilled labor force's employment opportunities. Instead, we will import to occupy specific vacant positions in the interim as we train our employees who are structurally unemployed. Not everybody is structurally unemployed, but we will train those who are indeed structurally unemployed. Importing labor doesn't mean taking away Jamaicans' jobs. Foreign workers often fill labor gaps in specific industries, creating new opportunities for Jamaicans in related fields. It's not a replacement, but a complement to local talent, bolstering economic growth and development. Madam Speaker, the opposition member spoke about the education being there and the skills being there for the labor force. However, Madam Speaker, he contradicted himself by stating that these skills are leaving. If such skills are leaving, Madam Speaker, permit me to ask a question: where should we get the workers? He further mentioned that incentives should be there, such as scholarships for those persons seeking to do tourism management. Yet another contradiction, Madam Speaker, because if he's so positive that thousands are graduating from the programs, then obviously they are adequately incentivized to enter the universities in the first place. Moreover, they listed all the incentives we offer, and yet that didn't even scrape the surface, as there are even more scholarships and bursaries where the citizens are seeking, whether the citizens are seeking such opportunities is the issue. Even if you are right, opposition, even if current labor force can quantitatively support the growth in the tourism nationally and globally, tourism is growing, and bringing imported labor can help Jamaica to keep up with the global growth and become more competitive and enhance our tourism reputation, as mentioned by our Prime Minister. With this, the proposition closes its case. Thank you.
We would have concluded our rebuttal section. When we return, Dr. Kerry Wallace, Executive Director at the Tourism Enhancement Fund, will present the winning scores.
The National Family Planning Board now presents a parenting tip from Forrest E. Whitcraft. 100 years from now, it will not matter what my bank account was, the sort of house I lived in, or the kind of car I drove, but the world may be different because I was important in the life of a child.
Welcome back. We'd like to thank our adjudicators, Mr. Lloyd B. Smith, CEO of the Western Mirror, Mr. Donovan Wignall, President of the MSME Alliance, and Dr. Kerry Wallace, Executive Director at the Tourism Enhancement Fund. We'll now invite Dr. Wallace to present the winning scores.
I would just like to start out by inviting you to give Michelle Tuller a round of applause for all the hard work that she's done in putting this together. It's a very impressive production, a very impressive program, and we believe it enhances Destination Jamaica, hence Tourism Enhancement Fund support for the program. So to her and all her team, all the teachers, all the schools who've participated, again, I invite you to give them all a round of applause. I want to also thank my fellow sponsors who've jumped on board to support it. I'd like to also thank esteemed judges who've dedicated their time to be here to participate in selecting from these brilliant minds the winners of today's competition. So let's give them a round of applause, please. Now, on to these superstars. The judges were very meticulous. They too were inspired. And together we scored the teams and just wanted to indicate that we recognize the hard work that was put in. We recognize how polished everybody was, how well rehearsed, how well researched. And so we want to thank you for putting out that effort and congratulate you for doing so well. The scores were 304,266, 373,314, and 296,274, meaning that it was a unanimous decision. All judges scored the winning team higher than the runner-up. A total of 973 points to 854 points. And the winning team, in fact, the trophy will in fact go to Clarendon because the winning team is Knox College. The top debater, I'm sure everyone will agree, also hailed from Knox and is in the person of Daniela Wright. The top debater on the Excelsior team was Joshua Atkins. Overall, great quality production. I found it very enjoyable. I found it very entertaining. Most of all, I found it very inspiring. So thank you for that. Thank you. And congratulations.
Congratulations to you, Daniel White. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling very good. First of all, very grateful to God for this win.
Team captain for Knox College. Now I have to ask you, in total, how many pins?
Honestly, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I'm not sure.
Very busy lady indeed. How do you believe that you had prepared enough for today? Did you have any doubts about winning? How do you feel? Because I know you have other competitions.
Yes, we prepared, I think, sufficiently as demonstrated by the win. But before the preparation continued, it began very early as soon as we got the motion, and it continued right up until, the bus on the way here. And we came and we delivered our best, and I'm happy.
We are here. I call her powerhouse Brianna Thomas, head girl for Excelsior High, second runner-up. Tell me a little bit on how you prepared with so many matches.
Well, it was a rocky road actually because we have been in 4 debate competitions back to back to back. However, we had the external help of our teachers, our coaches, and some people from Jade as well. So my team is very efficient and they work with a timetable. For instance, we know this time we have this debate, so we don't run off into something else. So we're very efficient, we're very supportive, and one thing with us, we'll always be prepared. If one person is not prepared, we ensure that we find information and get that person prepared, and that's how we work, teamwork.
A very difficult task. Dr. Kerry Wallace, the Executive Director at the Tourism Enhancement Fund, thank you so very much. Let's give him a round of applause. Congratulations to Knox College, who will now join Woolmer's Girls, Cornwall College, Belair High, Monroe College, St. Jago High as champions of the National Tourism Debate Competition. We'd like to thank our other adjudicators, sponsors, you, our audience and viewers. We'll see you next time, next season, that is in September 2024. I'm your host, Michelle Tuller, and thank you, PBCJ, can't forget PBCJ, for making this all possible. Until next time.